Hello, as always, I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be giving a first look at Overfall, a fantasy turn-based RPG in development by Pera Games. Now, the project originated on Kickstarter and was successfully funded to the tune of just over $67,000. Overfall takes elements of roguelike genre and incorporates them into its core design, which means that permadeath is in, and so is multiple runs of the game to unlock things for the following run. The game is currently available on Steam's Early Access program, and so everything that you do see here is subject to change. The premise of the game works around that two heroes were sent through a portal by the Everking on a quest. Upon returning, the two heroes discover that 3 centuries have passed and the Everking has disappeared. In the Everking's place, the Vaughn have shown up, raining destruction upon the lands, and your new task is finding the immortal Everking and defeating the Vaughn. It all sounds quite a serious affair, yet the entire game is packed with humour, from video game and pop culture references to turning classic fairy tales on their head. In fact, the game doesn't take itself too seriously at all, from the well-written dialogue to the nicely produced cartoon aesthetic. After selecting which characters you want to play as, Overfall starts you off in the overworld map, where you can sail your ship around, moving from island to island, finding quests, random encounters, inns and shops. You can also board and be boarded by other ships along your travels. There are several races in the world in which you must help, or choose not to move their respective reputation sliders to gain access to their homeland as well as their help against the Vaughn. Once you've selected an island you want to go to and land upon the island, you'll start an event. Now, this may just be a short one-off event, or it may be the start of a long branching quest line. There's a really good amount of content in the game, even after multiple runs. I've yet to encounter the same quest over. However, this content repetition will occur, as it's in the very design nature of the game that is centered around multiple playthroughs. Thankfully, Pera have preempted this issue with their own story builder, which allows players to design and build their own encounters, quests and content. This feature alone nullifies most of my usual complaints with roguelites in terms of their repetitive nature, their repetitive content, and the Overfall developers went even further to ensure players produce strong content for themselves and others by partnering up with Obsidian Entertainment's Chris Avallone to create a game writing style guide, something that is worth a read whether you're creating content or not. Having this story builder allows the content to be fresh and increases the potential longevity and replayability of Overfall by leaps and bounds when compared to similar games. I really like a lot of the encounters. Often they are well written, funny and fairly interesting. A boon the game has within each encounter is that it usually has diplomatic choices to avoid combat, and this in turn often has its own unique rewards. The diplomatic options allow you to take different paths in the encounters, some of which can grant you access to quests, characters and equipment. This means that gunning for a fight every time might be to your disadvantage, and you can potentially miss out on a lot of unlocks by just fighting all the time. Each class also has its own dialogue options when it comes to encounters, depending on which classes you have in your party. These options can offer resolutions that otherwise would not be available if they weren't in your party. Sometimes, however, you just won't be able to avoid combat, or you may choose not to. Overfall's combat system is a turn-based system that works from an initiative ladder that comprises of a 3-phase turn per character. Now, each character has a movement, utility and attack phase, with 2 or 3 abilities in each phase. Abilities are based on your character's class and on the equipment that you have equipped. For anyone who has played turn-based tactical RPG games before, you will be right at home here, as Overfall combat is pretty standard stuff. You have classes, you have buffs, you have debuffs, all that good stuff. It is, however, very well executed, and it pulls off the combination of simple and easy to pick up, but also having a surprising amount of tactical depth to it, which is something that I really like. Combat itself is fought on a hex gridded battleground. Something that I do like is that the battles are not fought on a separate screen, and there's no loading screen in between battles and just the usual talking. Instead, the grid drops right where you are. It's a nice little touch by the developers that keeps things really fluid and keeps you in focus in the game. The only negative to the combat is the camera perspective, and it can make target selection feel pretty dodgy when a bunch of characters are grouped up together, as it makes it difficult to see the tile selection. Something that I like in many RPGs is trait systems, whereby characters gain permanent and buffs and debuffs depending on what happens in the game. Overfall has such a trait system that works very well and tends to have a nice balance of buff to debuff ratio. Difficulty is also a major factor in games that have roguelike elements to them, and it's important to have a good difficulty curve throughout such a game. Overfall starts off well in this respect, however. Currently mid-game is fairly easy once you have upgraded your character via equipment and traits, and the difficulty curve seems to just drop off somewhere instead of remaining steady throughout the game. There are a couple of combat scenarios mid-game, end-game that still test you, but the difficulty is something that clearly needs worked on by the developers in the rest of development. Overall, however, I think that Overfall, even in its current state, is well worth a buy. The inclusion of a story builder is probably the game's biggest long-term asset, and it will make or break the game when it comes to retaining a player base long-term. The entire game is just well executed, it looks fantastic, it's well written, funny, and ultimately it's just quite a charming game. It's one of those select few early access titles that's got so much high quality from the start that purchasing it now is less of a risk compared to the sloth of disappointments in the early access program. It's up there with the likes of Darkest Dungeon and other early access gems that have planned well, executed well, and ultimately delivered great games in and of themselves, even in unfinished states, and you know that it's only going to get better come the full launch of the game. So that is my first impressions of Overfall. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Do like, subscribe, and leave a comment, and please share the video, and I will see you next time.